Hello there, welcome to Food Safety Fridays. My name is Simon Timperley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. Today's special guest is Tony Connor, and today's topic is how to develop a FSQMS compliant with BRCGS issue 9. So a very important and pertinent topic of the moment. I'm based in the UK, in sunny Manchester. Tony, where are you joining us from today? Good morning.
And in Koh Samui in Thailand. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, if you tell us where you join us from, as is the custom, Johanna from Florida, Wendy from PA, we're all having a good day. Yeah, I'm going to play the video ads now, and then we're back for the presentation shortly.
Food safety accidents are a real possibility these days, meaning an increased scrutiny and rigorous testing on production and other areas. From farmlands to dining tables, each stage of the entire food supply chain is challenged by product safety, quality, and effectiveness. Whether you're a grower, food packer, trader, or hold any important role in the food supply chain, HQTS can help you to ensure quality and safety from the source. Our services include product inspections, safety audits, quality management, and consulting and training. HQTS, your partner in quality.
Okay, let's get the slides on, and I'll be back for the Q&A later, but for now, I'll hand you over to Tony.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, welcome to this presentation on implementing the BRCGS Issue 9 Compliant Food Safety Management System. There's quite a lot of slides to go through. You'll get a copy of the presentation in a PDF format where you'll be able to see in more detail. So let's run through. So the standard has requires compliance in 4 key areas: senior management commitment, HACCP food safety plan, product safety and quality management system, and prerequisite programs. Issue 9 has the same sections as Issue 8. Senior management commitment, food safety plan HACCP, food safety and quality management system, site standards, product control, process control, personnel. 8 slightly reworded product risk zones, high risk and high care, and 9 requirements for traded products. The requirements in sections 1 to 7 are applicable to all operations, and where a site handles traded products, then section 9 is applicable. Sites with product high risk, high care or ambient high care facilities must meet the requirements in section 8. So, a warning about the standard here. A familiar theme in issue 9 of the standard is requirement for risk assessments. There are about 50 requirements to carry out risk assessments. The main changes in issue 9 have included and considered product safety culture, HACCP food safety plan, outsourced processing, equipment, animal primary conversion, and authenticity, a change of wording from integrity to authenticity throughout the standard. So, implementing a compliant food safety management system will usually involve the following steps. Learn about the BRCGS Global Standard for Food Safety, senior management implementation, implementation of good manufacturing practices, food safety quality management system, food safety plan HACCP implementation and training, product and process controls, training, internal audits, management reviews, self-assessment, and then a certification audit. The requirements deemed fundamental are the same in issue 9 and are highlighted as we go through the presentation. Developing a food safety management system involves understanding customer and regulatory requirements, developing policies and objectives, establishing food safety management system procedures, and then having supporting documents and records, for example, work instructions, specifications, etc. So these are the key requirements of section 1.1, senior management, commitment and continual improvement. These are the main changes in section 1. The statement of intent, an additional requirement for commitment to facilitate continual improvement of the site's food safety and quality culture. So, section 1, senior management commitment, a fundamental requirement. The site senior management shall demonstrate they are fully committed to the implementation of the requirements of the Global Standard for Food Safety and to processes which facilitate continual improvement of food safety, quality management, and the site's food safety and quality culture. There needs to be a document policy. There must be a policy to produce safe, legal, and authentic products to the specified quality, including commitment to continuously improve the site's food safety and quality culture. So on to food safety and quality culture. There needs to be a plan for the development of product safety culture. For a food safety culture to flourish, the importance of food safety should be understood by all members of staff. It needs to be led by senior management to ensure that the necessary commitment, support, and resources are available. The plan should include measures needed to achieve a positive culture change. This can include defined activities involving all sections of the site that have an impact on product safety. As a minimum, these activities shall be designed around clear and open communication, training, feedback from employees, the behaviors required to maintain and improve product safety processes, performance measurement on activities related to safety, authenticity, legality and quality of products, an action plan indicating how the activities will be undertaken and measured and the intended timescales. And then finally, a review of the effectiveness of completed activities. On to documented food safety objectives. These should be defined to maintain and improve the safety, authenticity, legality, and quality of products. There are requirements for senior management reviews, to have a meeting program, to have a confidential reporting system. The company should have a confidential reporting system to enable staff to report concerns relating to product safety, integrity, quality, and legality. There are requirements for the provision of human and financial resources, and for the site to be informed of all relevant legislative and scientific information. On to 1.2, Organizational Structure, Responsibilities and Management Authority. The key requirements are an organizational chart and for employees to be aware of their responsibilities. The company shall have a clear organizational structure and the lines of communication to enable effective management of product safety, legality, and quality. The company shall ensure that all employees are aware of their responsibilities. Where documented work instructions exist for all activities undertaken, the relevant employees shall have access to these and be able to demonstrate that work is carried out in accordance with the instructions. Staff also need to be aware of their reporting responsibilities. On to Section 2, the Food Safety Plan, HACCP. It's a fundamental requirement. There must be an implemented and effective food safety plan incorporating the Codex Alimentarius HACCP principles. Codex HACCP principles were updated in 2020. The relevant section is Codex Recommended International Code of Practice, General Principles of Food Hygiene, Chapter 2. Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point HACCP system and its guidelines for its application. And principles of the HACCP system. Back to Section 2. There are 12 steps prescribed in Codex Alimentarius. And these are covered in Section 2, plus 2.2, prerequisite programs. 2.14, review of the HACCP plan, has become clause 12.2.3, as the review process is closely linked to validation and verification processes in that section. So, the plan must be specific to the products manufactured, processed, or packed on the site and the production processes used. The food safety plan shall be developed and managed by a multidisciplinary food safety team that includes those responsible for quality assurance, technical management, production operations, and other relevant functions such as engineering and hygiene. The scope of each food safety plan, including the products and processes covered, shall be defined. There are requirements to establish and maintain environmental and operational programs necessary to create an environment suitable to produce safe and legal food products. The standard refers to all these prerequisite programs, from cleaning and disinfection to allergen management. (2.3) is describe the product. A full description for each product group or group of products shall be developed, which includes all relevant information on food safety. So, all relevant information needed to conduct the hazard analysis shall be collected, maintained, documented, and updated. The company shall ensure that the HACCP or food safety plan is based on comprehensive information sources, and these sources need to be referenced and available on request. 2.4 is identify intended use. The intended use of the product by the customer and expected alternative uses shall be described, defining the consumer target groups, including the suitability of the product for vulnerable groups of the population, such as infants, elderly, and allergy sufferers. In 2.5, there's a requirement to construct a process flow diagram. And 2.6, the food safety team shall verify the accuracy and flow diagrams by on-site audit. This is for all stages and hours of operation. 2.7 is to list all potential hazards associated with each process step and conduct a hazard analysis and consider any control measures to control identified hazards. (2.7.2) is to identify significant hazards. The food safety team must take into account the likely occurrence of the hazard, taking into consideration existing prerequisite programs, the nature of the facility, and the equipment used, the severity of the effects on consumer safety, the vulnerability of the exposed, the survival and growth of microorganisms, the presence or production of toxins, chemicals, or foreign bodies, contamination of raw materials, intermediates, and semi-processed product or finished product. A brief mention of the Food Safety Modernisation Act here. This where it requires the probability of the analysis where the probability of the hazard will occur in the absence of preventative controls. They also reference relevant other hazards, which include things like parasites, unapproved food and colour additives. So you need to assess whether the hazard will occur in the absence of preventive controls, which is different to BRCGS standard. So you do need to take into account relevant legislation when developing your food safety plans. And preventive controls include CCPs and also controls other than those at CCPs that are appropriate for food safety. So back to the BRCGS standard. 2.8, determine the critical control points. For each hazard that requires control, control points shall be reviewed to identify those that are critical. This requires a logical approach and may be facilitated by the use of a decision tree. CCP shall be those control points which are required in order to prevent or eliminate a food safety hazard or reduce it to an acceptable level. 2.9 is establish validated critical limits for each CCP. It's equivalent to Codex Step 8, Principle 3. Codex also provides further guidance on validation and is described in guidelines for the validation of food safety and control measures. 2.10 is establish a monitoring system for each CCP. 2.11, establish a corrective plan. 2.12, validate the HACCP plan and establish its verification procedures. So validate the HACCP plan is a new requirement. The food safety or HACCP plan shall be validated prior to any changes that might affect food safety. And 2.13 is HACCP documentation and record keeping, equivalent to Step 12, Principle 7. So verification activities can be managed using audit checklists, for an example. And don't forget, people should be trained. There should be a training of employees in control measures and critical control points. The standard doesn't require any specific terminology. There are references to HACCP or Food Safety Plan rather than the HACCP plan, and equivalent to Codex throughout Section 2. HACCP plans should include process step, hazard, control measure, critical limits, monitoring procedures, responsibilities, corrective action, and reference to relevant records. So on to Section 3, Food Safety and Quality Management System, and 3.1, Food Safety and Quality Manual. The company's processes and procedures to meet the requirements of this standard shall be documented to allow consistent application, facilitate training, and support due diligence in the production of a safe product. The site's procedures, working methods, and practices shall be collated in the form of a printed or electronic quality manual. There are also specific requirements for document control and also record completion and maintenance. And where records and documents are stored in electronic form, these shall also be stored securely with authorized access control of amendments, password protected, and backed up to prevent any loss. On to Section 3.4, Internal Audit. Is a fundamental requirement. The company shall be able to demonstrate that it verifies the effective application of the Food Safety Plan and the implementation of the requirements of the Global Standard for Food Safety. As a minimum, the internal audit program will include at least 4 different audit dates spread throughout the year. The internal audit frequency should be based on risk. This can be achieved using an internal audit planner. All activities should be covered at least once a year. As a minimum, the scope of the internal audit program shall include the HACCP plan, or Food Safety Plan, prerequisite programs, food defense and food fraud prevention plans, procedures implemented to achieve the standard. Internal audit reports shall identify conformity as well as non-conformity. All non-conformities from internal audit should be handled as per Section 3.7 corrective action. In addition to the internal audit program, there shall be a program of documented inspections. These are hygiene inspections to assess cleaning and housekeeping performance, and fabrication inspections. The results shall be reported to the personnel responsible for the activity or area audited. Corrective actions and timescales for their implementation shall be agreed and their completion verified. Inspection scoring like this can be used for trend analysis and demonstrate improvement, for instance, as part of your food safety culture improvement. A summary of the results of internal audits and inspections should be reviewed at the management review meeting. So your internal audit system should have procedures, schedule, resources, trained independent auditors, actions, communication, review, follow-up, records, and reports. On to Section 5, Supplier and Raw Material Approval and Performance Monitoring. It's a fundamental requirement. Form 3.5.1, Management of Suppliers of Raw Materials and Packaging. there should be effective supplier approval and monitoring system. You are required to undertake a documented risk assessment for each raw material or group of raw materials, including primary packaging, to identify potential risks to safety, authenticity, legality, and quality. Supplier approval can be by valid certification to the applicable BRCGS Global Standard or GFSI benchmark standard. The scope of the certificate shall include the raw materials purchase. Certificates used as evidence in supplier approval processes must be valid, and the accuracy of the information received from the supplier must be confirmed. So, for example, this can be done on the BRCGS directory and can be used to confirm the supplier's certification status, and the product scope includes raw materials purchased by the site. Similarly, for the FSQMS directory, or supplier approval can be by supplier audits. Where the supplier audit is completed by a second or third party, there is a need to demonstrate the competency of the auditor, confirm that the scope of the audit, and obtain and review a copy of the full audit report. Where a valid risk-based justification is provided and the supplier is low risk only, a completed supplier questionnaire may be used for initial approval. There needs to be a documented process for the ongoing review and monitoring of suppliers based on risk and using defined performance criteria. Controls on the acceptance of raw materials shall ensure that these do not compromise the safety, legality, or quality of products, and where appropriate, any claims of authenticity. The approval and monitoring of suppliers of services and outsourced processors shall be based on risk. When a product leaves site and does not return, this is not outsourced processing. The activities completed off-site are outside the scope of the audit. The requirements for outsourced processes include where any processes are outsourced, the risk to the product safety, authenticity, and legality shall form part of the site's food safety plan. Requirements for outsourced processing shall be agreed and documented in a service specification. Outsourced processing operations shall be undertaken in accordance with established contracts and maintain product traceability. There's a requirement to establish inspection and test procedures for products where part of the processing has been outsourced. On to specifications. Specifications may be in the form of a printed or electronic document or part of an online specification system. They shall exist for raw materials, including primary packaging and finished products. On to corrective action and preventive action. It's a fundamental requirement. The site shall be able to demonstrate that it uses the information from identified failures in the food safety and quality management system to make necessary corrections and prevent recurrence. Examples include non-conforming products, internal audits, complaint, recalls, product testing, second and third party audits, and online reviews. The site shall have a procedure for completion of root cause analysis. BRCGS guidance prescribes the 5 whys technique. There needs to be a procedure for the control of non-conforming product. And section 3.9, traceability, is a fundamental requirement. The site shall be able to trace all raw material product lots, including primary packaging, from its supplier through all stages of processing and dispatch to its customers and vice versa. The site must have a formal traceability procedure. The traceability test shall include a summary of the documents that should be referenced during the traceability test and clearly show the links between them. Systems should also be in place to ensure that rework is controlled and traceable. On to complaint handling. All complaints shall be recorded and investigated. The results of the investigation should be recorded. Complaint data shall be analysed for significant trends. Where there's been a significant increase in a complaint or a serious complaint, root cause analysis shall be used to implement ongoing improvements. On to 3.11, management of incidents, product withdrawal and product recall. There must be procedures to manage emergencies and incidents such as disruption of services and events such as flooding. There also needs to be procedures in place to effectively withdraw or recall products. And in addition to this, in the event of a significant food safety incident, your certification body needs to be notified within 3 working days. On to section 4, which is site standards. External standards and site security. There are requirements for local activities and site environment, maintenance of external areas, maintenance of buildings, site security, and control of access to the site by staff, visitors, and contractors. 4.2 is food defence. Systems shall protect products, premises, and brands from malicious actions while under the control of the site. Areas where there is a significant risk must be defined in the food safety plan, monitored and controlled. Where raw materials or products are identified as being at a particular risk, the threat assessment plan shall include controls to mitigate these risks. In addition, staff shall be trained in site security procedures and food defence. On to layout, product flow and segregation, which is a fundamental requirement. The layout, flow of processes and movement of personnel shall be sufficient to prevent the risk of product contamination and to comply with relevant legislation. There should be a map of the site defining production risk zones, access points, routes, location of facilities, production flows, and any areas where time segregation is used, and the movement of personnel, raw materials, and packaging and rework and waste must not compromise the safety of products. There's also a new clause to define the production risk zones. 4.4 Building fabric. The fabric of the site, buildings and facilities should be applicable for its intended purpose. There are standards for walls, doors, strip curtains, floors, drainage, ceilings, overheads, elevated walkways, access steps, mezzanine floors, windows, lighting, ventilation, and extraction. Utilities, water, ice, air, and other gases. There are requirements for the water supply, for the water distribution system, and for monitoring of gases and steam. On to section 6, 4.6 equipment. There's extended requirements in issue 9. All production and product handling equipment shall be suitable for the intended purpose and shall be used to minimize the risk of product contamination. There are requirements for new equipment purchase specifications. This means new equipment to site, so may be refurbished or second-hand equipment. There are also requirements for equipment in direct contact with food, equipment design and construction, the movement and repositioning of static equipment, storage of equipment, control of mobile equipment, and battery charging equipment. There also needs to be a documented risk-based commissioning procedure for equipment. Process change approval procedures and forms can help with this process. On to maintenance. There are requirements for a schedule, equipment inspection, for temporary repairs to be documented and controlled, for clean-up after maintenance work, use of food-grade materials, and workshops. Maintenance work shall be followed by a documented hygiene clearance procedure. Equipment and machinery shall be inspected by an authorized member of staff to confirm the removal of contamination hazards before being accepted back into operation. Ideally, maintenance work should be carried out outside of production hours. On to 4.8 staff facilities. There are requirements for changing facilities, storage of personal items, segregation of personal items from work clothing, hand washing facilities, toilets, smoking areas, staff food, catering facilities. On to 4.9, chemical and physical product contamination control. Appropriate facilities and procedures shall be in place to control the risk of chemical or physical contamination. For chemical control, there needs to be the storage and handling of non-food chemicals and control of chemicals with strong scents and taints. In method control, we should avoid and control the use of staples, paper clips, and other similar metallic items. We should avoid packaging and ingredients that use staples or other foreign body risks. We should also control sharp metal implements such as knives. There should be control of glass and brittle materials. There should be exclusion of unnecessary materials and protection of glass items such as light fittings from breakage. There should be documented handling procedures. There should be a list of items giving details of their location, number, type, and condition, a risk assessment defining the frequency of checks, records of inspections, procedures for cleaning or replacement of items in a way that minimize the potential risk of contamination of products. There should also be a glass or brittle material breakage procedure. In 4.9.4, there are also requirements for products packed into glass or other brittle containers. Wood should not be used in open product areas except where there is a process requirement such as maturation of products in wood. Wood used for food contact purposes shall be fit for purpose. There are also requirements for the control of other physical contaminants, such as deboxing procedures, control of stationery, and portable handheld equipment. On to 4.10, foreign body detection and removal equipment. The risk of product contamination shall be reduced or eliminated by the effective use of equipment to remove or detect foreign bodies. A documented assessment to identify the potential use of equipment to detect or remove foreign body contamination should be in place. The hazard analysis should be the starting point for implementing an effective foreign body control system. Potential hazards and the sources of those hazards must be identified so that appropriate control procedures can be put in place to minimize the likelihood of product contamination. Typical equipment to be considered includes filters, sieves, metal detection, X-ray detection, magnets, optical sorting equipment, and other physical separation equipment. The type, location, and sensitivity of the detection and/or removal method shall be specified as part of the site's documented system. Metal detection. Metal detection equipment shall be in place unless risk assessment demonstrates that this does not improve food safety. Processes for the operation and testing of both metal detection and X-ray equipment is now included in Issue 9. There are requirements for documented procedures for checks of magnets and optical sorting equipment, if applicable. Based on risk assessment, procedures shall be implemented to minimize foreign body contamination originating from the packaging container. This may include the use of covered conveyors, container inversion, and foreign body removal through rinsing with water or air jets. On to Section 411, Hygiene and Housekeeping, which is a fundamental requirement. Housekeeping and cleaning systems shall be in place which ensure appropriate standards of hygiene are maintained at all times and the risk of product contamination is minimized. There are requirements for cleanliness of premises and equipment, documented cleaning procedures, cleaning performance limits, training and resources, cleaning inspection and sign-off, and cleaning equipment. There should be cleaning records and checks and sign-off of the cleaning. For cleaning in place CIP, there are also extensive requirements. There are also requirements for limits of acceptable and unacceptable cleaning performance to be defined for food contact surfaces and processing equipment. Environmental monitoring. The use of monitoring techniques within a factory is an important tool for identifying the risk of potential product contamination with both pathogens and spoilage organisms. As a minimum, this shall include all production areas with open and ready-to-eat products. The design of the environmental monitoring program should be based on risk. It should include sampling protocol, identification of sample locations, target organisms, for example, pathogens and spoilage organisms or indicator organisms. Appropriate control limits must be defined and corrective action taken. There is a requirement to review the program at least annually, and whenever there are changes or issues such as product failures, new pathogens of concern, or consistently negative results. On to 412, waste disposal, which should be managed in accordance with legal requirements and to prevent accumulation, risk of contamination, and the attraction of pests. There are requirements for licensing and legislation, waste storage, removal of waste from open product areas, unsafe and trademark waste. 4.12.3 requires waste to be removed from open product areas and managed to ensure it does not compromise food safety. 413 covers the management of surplus food and products for animal feed. Effective processes shall be in place to ensure the safety and legality of byproducts of the primary processing activities of the site. 414 is pest management. The whole site shall have an effective preventive pest management program in place to minimize the risk of pests present, and resources shall be available to respond rapidly to any issues which occur to prevent risk to products. The requirements for pest management programs to comply with applicable legislation and legislation governing the use of pest control products should be understood and complied with. There are requirements for pest activity and actions, pest management with inspection frequency based on risk, in-house pest management documentation and records, bait stations, insect killing devices, birds, infestation and evidence of pest activity. The site shall have adequate measures in place to prevent birds from entering buildings or roosting above loading or unloading areas. There are requirements for records of pest management inspections, pest management overall assessment, which should be at least annually, periodic assessment of pest control and trend analysis, and staff reporting of pest activity. On to 4.15 and storage facilities. All storage facilities should be suitable for purpose. There should be documented procedures to maintain product safety and quality during storage, which are developed on the basis of risk assessment. There are requirements for storage in a controlled atmosphere, any outside storage, for the storage of packaging, for temperature control, and for stock rotation. 4.16. Dispatch and transport. Procedures shall be in place to ensure that the management of dispatch and the vehicles and containers used for transporting products from the site do not present a risk to the safety, security, or quality of the products. There are requirements for dispatch and transport procedures, vehicle inspection, vehicle temperature control, vehicle maintenance and hygiene, transport procedures, third-party contractors. All vehicles and containers used for the transport and dispatch of materials and products shall be fit for purpose. On to Section 5, Product Control. 5.1 is Product Design and Development. Product design and development procedures shall be in place for new products or processes and any changes to product packaging or manufacturing processes to ensure that safe and legal products are produced. There are requirements for new product development, approval of HACCP for new products. There's a new requirement for artwork approval and sign-off procedures, but those are included in 5.2.1 product labeling. There's also requirements for product trials and initial shelf life evaluation. On to product labeling. Product labeling shall comply with the appropriate legal requirements and contain information to enable the safe handling, display, storage, and preparation of the products. There are requirements for the legality of labels, label reviews, nutritional claims, third-party label design, and cooking instructions. This is one of the best labels I've come across, about pan fry slowly. But seriously, there's a requirement for cooking instructions to be validated. And this is the reason why here confusing microwave instructions on a pie led to a salmonella outbreak. Okay, 5.3 is management of allergens, which is a fundamental requirement. A system must be in place for the management of allergenic materials, which minimizes the risk of allergen contamination of products and meets legal requirements for labeling in the country of sale. The site shall carry out an assessment of raw materials to establish the presence and likelihood of contamination by allergens. There are requirements for raw material assessment, list of allergenic materials, identify areas of potential cross-contamination, and a risk assessment for cross-contamination. There are requirements for cross-contamination prevention procedures and also control of rework. There are also requirements for unpacked warning labels and allergen claims. There's also requirements for allergen cleaning regimes. On to 5.4, product authenticity claims and chain of custody. Systems should be in place to minimize the risk of purchasing fraudulent or adulterated raw materials and ensure that all product descriptions and claims are legal, accurate, and verified. You should have access to information on historical and developing threats to the supply chain, which may present a risk of adulteration or substitution of raw materials. Where personnel are engaged in vulnerability assessments, the individual or team responsible shall understand the potential food fraud risks. A documented vulnerability assessment should be carried out for all raw materials to assess the potential risk of adulteration. The output of the assessment shall be a vulnerability plan. For high-risk adulteration or substitution, appropriate assurance and/or testing procedures should be in place to mitigate the identified risks. All claims need to be substantiated. On to 5.5, product packaging. Product packaging and the processes for the purchase of product packaging shall be appropriate for the intended use. Packaging shall be stored under conditions to prevent contamination and minimize deterioration. There should be compliance with legal requirements. And also there's requirements for product contact liners. When purchasing or specifying primary packaging, the supplier of the packaging materials shall be made aware of any particular characteristics of the food, such as high fat content, pH, or usage conditions such as microwaving, which may affect the packaging suitability. There is a requirement to have a procedure to manage obsolete packaging. Problems with obsolete packaging include stock write-off value and the cost of disposal. Excessive stock can be due to poor planning and control, and it's usually around because people or the management may not want to write it off. These issues aren't just limited to packaging, but could also apply to ingredients. On to section 5.6, which is changed to product inspection, on-site product testing, and laboratory analysis. Previously, 5.6.1 product inspection and testing and 5.6.2 laboratory testing have now been combined in one section. The company shall undertake or subcontract inspection analyses which are critical to confirm product safety, authenticity, legality, and quality using appropriate procedures, facilities, and standards. For analyses that are critical to product safety, authenticity, or legality, the laboratory must be accredited or operate in accordance with the requirements and principles of ISO 17025. You must also ensure the reliability of other laboratory results. There needs to be a scheduled program of product testing and a system of validation and ongoing verification of the shelf life of products. Test and inspection results shall be recorded and reviewed regularly to identify trends. The significance of laboratory results shall be understood and acted upon. There's a new requirement, where applicable, the measurement uncertainty associated with laboratory test results shall be considered. On to 5.7, product release. Products should be released by authorized personnel only when all agreed release criteria has been fulfilled. Section 5.8 is pet food, which now includes animal feed as well. And there's a new section 5.9 for animal primary conversion. Onto section 6, which is process control. And 6.1, control of operations, which is a fundamental requirement. The site shall operate to documented procedures and/or working structures that ensure the production of consistently safe and legal product with the desired quality characteristics in full compliance with the HACCP Food Safety Plan. There are requirements for manufacturing instructions and process specifications, process monitoring, inline monitoring devices, critical safety or quality parameters, equipment failure and results outside defined limits. There are also requirements for the control of equipment settings. Where equipment settings are critical to the safety or legality of the product, changes to the equipment settings must only be completed by trained and authorized staff. Onto labeling and pack control, a fundamental requirement. The management controls of product labeling activities shall ensure that products will be correctly labeled and coded. There are requirements for allocation of packaging materials, production line checks, packaging controls, online vision equipment, labeling and pack control, and the control of offline coding and printing. This is an example of a label checking and retention record. The label is cross-checked by operators in real time, checked by the supervisor hourly, and checked by the production manager at the end of the shift. Here's a slide from my Food Safety Live presentation in 2013. At the time I said more than 60% of FDA reported recalls were related to allergen labeling. Here are the most recent FDA recalls. A common theme still since 2007 have been that there are 635 recalls due to labeling issues. That's approximately 50%. There are extensive requirements that can contribute to packaging and label control in the BRCGS standard, including product development, product labeling, management of allergens, product authenticity, control of operations, all these in addition to purchasing, goods in checks, and training. Processes must be in place to check label use is reconciled with expected use and the cause of any inconsistencies investigated. On to 6.3, quantity. There should be a quantity control system which conforms to legal requirements in the country where the product is sold, and any additional industry sector codes or specified customer requirements. Where used, the site shall establish procedures for the operation and testing of online check weighers. On to calibration. There's a requirement to demonstrate that measure equipment is sufficiently accurate and reliable to provide confidence in measurement results. You need to identify and control measuring equipment used to monitor critical points, control points, and product safety, legality, and quality. There are requirements for identification and control of measuring equipment, calibration checks, reference equipment, equipment outside specified limits. On to Section 7, personnel. Training is a fundamental requirement. The company shall ensure that all personnel performing work that affects product safety, legality, and quality are demonstrably competent to carry out their activity through training, work experience, or qualification. There are specific requirements for initial training and supervision, CCP training, allergen training, training on the site's labeling and packing processes, for a documented training program, for training records, and for competency review. 7.2 Personal Hygiene. Personal hygiene standards shall be developed to minimize the risk of product contamination from personnel and be appropriate to the products produced and be adopted by all personnel. There are specific requirements for a documented personal hygiene policy, hand washing, cuts and grazes, metal detectable plasters, and personal medicines. So medical screening. There are specific requirements for illness notification by employees, illness notification procedures for visitors to the site, and a documented infectious disease procedure. On to 7.4 Protective clothing. Suitable site-issued protective clothing shall be worn by employees, contractors, or visitors working in or entering production areas. There are requirements for a documented protective clothing policy, availability and design of protective clothing, laundry, the changing of protective clothing, and gloves. And also control of protective clothing that can't be laundered. On to Section 8, Production Risk Zones. High risk, high care, and ambient high care. Where a site produces high risk, high care, or ambient high care, Sections 1 to 7 of the standard must be fulfilled in addition to requirements of this section. Expectations for factory hygiene, finish of buildings, equipment, protective clothing, and staff hygiene should reflect the potential risk to the product. So what are high care, high risk, ambient high care? Here's some product examples. High risk includes cooked meats, high care sandwiches, ambient high care, chocolate, milk powder, peanut butter. 8.1 Layout, product flow and segregation. The map of the site shall include the location of pathogen control steps. Where high-risk areas are part of the manufacturing site, there shall be physical segregation between these areas and other parts of the site. Segregation shall take into account the flow of the product, the nature of the materials, the equipment, the personnel, chemicals, the disposal of waste, the flow of air, the air quality, and the provision of utilities, including drains. Building fabric. There are specific requirements for drainage, ventilation, and control of any removable walls. Maintenance. There are additional requirements for the movement of equipment and the control and removal and return, and the control of portable equipment. 8.4 has requirements for high care and high care area changing facilities. 8.5 Hygiene and housekeeping, requirement for documented cleaning procedures, validation of cleaning and disinfection procedures if controlling a specific hazard, and for CIP equipment, which should be dedicated to the area or controlled. Again, cleaning performance limits must be defined, particularly for these areas, and can be by visual appearance, ATP tests, microbiological testing, or chemical testing as appropriate. There should be appropriate cleaning facilities, and equipment used for cleaning in these areas shall be visually distinctive and dedicated for use in the area and cleaned and stored in a hygienic manner. So I want to mention this. A significant number of recalls are due to contamination with well-known environmental pathogens. Analysis of data since 2017 shows that a third of all recalls are due to pathogen contamination. On to 8.6 Waste disposal. There are additional requirements for waste disposal in high risk or high care areas. Then 8.7, their requirements for laundry of protective clothing for high care or high risk areas, an audit and evaluation of cleaning of protective clothing. There are requirements for protective clothing for high risk areas and for the changing of protective clothing. Section 9 covers the requirements for traded products, which now includes a new section, Food Safety Plan HACCP. So here's some useful links that you can refer to, which will be on the PDF. Also a reminder that BRCGS offers useful resources, help and guidance, training, participate. The IFSQN offers other Food Safety Friday webinars, which may be useful. There's quite a few to go through. And also, I'd like to mention that IFSQN offer a BRC Food Safety and Quality Management System implementation package for food manufacturers that's compliant with Issue 9. It includes many of the procedures and tools you've seen in this presentation: Food Safety Management System and Prerequisite Procedures, Codex Food Safety Plan Procedures and Tools 2020 compliant, Food Safety Management System record templates, training presentation and guidance, and other implementation assistance, including startup guide, implementation workbook, instructions, and technical support. Any questions? Any questions? Chat.
Yes, it's a lot of questions, to be honest with you. Thanks, Tony.
Right.
So a question from Diana. Let's see. How can the validation of certification status be documented for suppliers that are not listed in the directories? Some suppliers can choose to not be listed in the directories.
I'm not sure that's the case. But you could always query that. And normally, I've come about the suppliers are listed in the directory, so I haven't come across that problem. But it should be in there. It should tell you the scope of their audit and the date of certification.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Question from Alexandra. Can you switch your webcam on, Tony? Or
I can do, yes. If you want to see my ugly mug, that's no problem. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Alexandra, what if suppliers don't want to provide audit reports? This happens a lot.
They provide? My question would be, what are they providing then? Are they providing a copy of the certificate? You could ask them to complete a supplier questionnaire. You don't need to see a copy of the audit report unless it's a second or third party. You're using that for the audit report for your approval. If you're using the certificate, you can approve them based on the certificate and checking it's valid.
Yeah. You could maybe also ask for a copy, not the full report, the non-conformities and the corrective action that they'd implemented, if they'd give you that, maybe.
I think my view is if a supplier isn't supplying relevant information, you should be looking for another one. I'm not very tolerant on that sort of thing. I mean, sometimes you don't have any choice, but I've got past the stage of tolerance, really. Yeah.
Annette, what does it mean by documented clearance procedure?
Documented clearance procedure for... Sorry, could you explain that?
That's the question. What does it mean by a documented clearance procedure? Is that a clearance, a line clearance, I guess?
Oh, sorry, yeah, in maintenance. Yeah. So for this is packaging, not maintenance. Documented clearance. So when you change over on packaging or products, you make sure you stop. You take away all the packaging, labels, everything. Make sure it's clear, and then you bring in all the new packaging, and then this avoids any problems. Historically, people kept multiple labels next to a filling machine, let's say, and it led to many problems with label issues. So now there should only be the one set of labels next to the production line when they're making that product. When they finish that product, that should be removed, and then the other. So there shouldn't be multiple product labels on a production line at the same time, which can cause chaos, massive problems. Yeah, it's just sorry.
Yeah, if they're there, human error, they'll use it, and then it gets on the wrong thing. Product recall, big cost.
Yeah.
Or somebody getting ill or something.
Yeah, 50,000, I think, was the minimum product recall cost in the UK previously.
Yeah,
that was a few years ago. Yeah.
Edwin, what are the methods of validating critical limits in HACCP plans?
Yeah, methods are legislation. So pasteurization, 71.7 for a minimum of 15 seconds. There might be scientific literature. So feasibility studies, there might be industry codes of practice. You can you do your own in-house. You might do your own in-house validation studies, doing extensive trials of the product in-house to prove that it meets by applying your control limits and control measure. You can achieve the required end result and produce an acceptable level of hazard in the finished product.
Okay, question from Diana. It's quite a long question. In your experience, is it possible that a GFSI certified company does not have a CCP chart, sort of document where the critical limits, method and frequency of monitoring, corrective action, etc.? To my understanding, this is a mandatory step when building the HACCP plan.
Yeah, but let's say they might not. Let's say they might not have any CCPs. But what I would expect them to do is, even if they didn't have CCP, if they had no CCPs, that's possible. But I would expect them to identify hazards, have control measures, have control limits, document how they monitor it, the corrective action if it's out of specification, and responsibility for monitoring, and where it's recorded. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, there needs to be some control there. They might say, I don't have a HACCP plan, but because I don't have any CCPs. But I'd say, okay, well, maybe you should have a control plan, or you want to call it what you like, but a food safety plan that demonstrates you're controlling whatever hazard, even if they're not critical control points that you've got.
Yeah. Edwin, can you explain the methods that can be used to measure food safety quality culture?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that comes up a lot with how do you monitor food safety culture? Well, you can do it by looking at overall performance. You can look at compliance with audits. You can look at inspections. I mentioned earlier about one of the things I like with my GMP inspections is I do a score. So you can demonstrate an improvement in the scores that are achieved globally across the site and also by area. And there are other things generally, but you need to measure the overall site performance as part of that, but not direct. It's sort of associated with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Annette. So Annette wants to understand how to implement label reconciliation, and also.
No, it's not. It's not monthly. It's when it's at the end of the production run.
Right.
So how many did you get? How many products? How many products did you produce? What's a typical waste? Let's say it's 5%. Now, if the difference on what goes back or how many you've used is bigger than 5%, then you go, there's a problem. There's a problem here, and then I need to investigate it. Now, if you don't do it straight away, and you wait till the end of the week, and there is a problem, you might be investigating product that's already gone out into the market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Sananda. Can you please explain more about quantitative measure and useful statistical analysis?
Quantitative measure, well, it depends on your local legislation. Like, so, yeah, quantities can be like a minimum weight. So your product needs to be a minimum of 200 grams, or then it might be an average weight, and that depends on your local legislation. An average weight legislation typically says the average weight of the container needs to be the declared weight, and it doesn't matter how many weights are between the nominated weight and T1, but there can't be any below T2, and this is a certain percentage of the actual nominated weight. So, okay. Yeah, and in that, you sometimes need statistical tech analysis to calculate how many samples out of your whole production run are within the limits. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Maro's asking, is it necessary to wear a hairnet in a pet food factory?
I would think a pet food factory would apply the same standards as a human food factory.
Yeah, we've done training in pet food manufacturing with Dr. David Rosenblatt before, and yeah, they're
that
very
might be
rigorous.
Worth looking at. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it will be worth looking at that actually.
Yeah.
Question from June. If hazard is fully controlled by prerequisite program, is it required to be a process control point, PCP?
I'm not hung up, June, on what you want to call it, as long as it's controlled. But what I will say is if it's a significant hazard, then you need to validate that prerequisite program to demonstrate that it controls to the significant hazard and reduces it or eliminates it or reduces it to an acceptable level. So you can call it what you like. You can call it a process control point, but the important thing is it controls the hazard, and if it's a significant hazard, you validate that prerequisite program.
Okay. Question from Lee. What is the minimum standard for internal auditor training?
Internal audit training is the requirement is for your auditor to be competent. So that's essentially and the audit team leader normally has to the team lead or the person in charge of the internal auditing should be a team leader or have a team lead auditor qualification, which is typically 5 days. But the requirements for that can be in-house training, can be external training. We do internal auditor training. It's a 4-hour training course, and that meets the requirements for GFSI benchmark standards. So you need to show what training you've done, the contents of it, and proof of the training. And we do an online test or exam, and only people that pass get the certificate. So that's what sort of thing that an internal audit should have, but it doesn't need to be external. It can be internal training if you've got somebody to do that that's qualified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Alok. What are globally approved migration tests for plastics coming into direct contact with food? Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Basically, it depends. There are different tests. Depends what the plastic is, what the layer that's coming into contact with the food is, and what the food stuff is, and also the processing parameters. You know, whether it's, I don't know, pasteurized or heat coming into contact. So it's very much depending on your product, process, and material and the end use of that packaging and uses of that packaging. So you really have to contact an accredited lab to be able to help you to formulate your testing strategy, etc. Mark, how do you verify the authenticity of your supply chain?
Well, you're doing supplier approval, aren't you? So you're following your supplier approval procedure, and you might decide that the material you're purchasing is at risk. So you might put in extra control measures, like you might decide to request certificates of analysis with every delivery, or you might decide that every batch of product that you get into site, you check for authenticity. So it's tested by your own lab or an independent lab to verify its authenticity.
Okay, thanks.
So,
Kathy is asking why it's not possible to have BRCGS logo on products and have it websites and email signatures. It's just not allowed by BRCGS. It's, you know, so that's it. The entire reasoning, I'm not sure. They're not approving your product and you know, allowing their logo on that. So, okay, Godapti. What is parameters check of visitors of the food industry? We will get formats. So what's a check of?
Well, visitors, you want to know if visitors, you're going to ask them to fill in a questionnaire. You want to know if they've been to an area where there's high risk of infection, or if they or somebody close to them has been ill recently. So the questionnaire will regard to illness, and you'll want to know, and if they are a risk from infection or are infected, then you want to exclude them from site. And also in that questionnaire, you might also want to tell them what the hygiene rules are related to site. Yeah.
Okay. And a question from Dugu. Is it obligatory to wear working clothes, pants and sweatshirts, or is it okay to wear lab coat over personal clothes? Okay, so full overalls, like laundered overalls, or is it okay to wear a lab coat over personal clothes? We don't know what, whether you're packaging of food or high risk or whatever.
Yeah, typically you wear your protective clothing over your personal clothes. But I mean, unless it's something low particular risk, I always like to see people in company laundered protective clothing. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? I think that's it actually. So yeah, brilliant. I know there's a lot of slides and a lot to get through. There's a lot of requirements and you can't dig into the detail of all of them. You can just sort of say what they are and take some questions really. So a great overview. Thanks for putting that together, Tony. I really appreciate it.
That's okay. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okie dokie. Right. So the only other thing is to issue your certificate just for attending today. You will have to print and sign it yourself, or you can download it in an image editing package such as Paint and add text and type your name. But we can't personalize them because there's just too many to do. Okay, so thanks for attending today. We'll be following up shortly with an email to you all with the recording, a copy of the slides, and again, your certificate if you didn't grab it now. So thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.